Secrets of the C-Suite, the podcast, is for anyone interested in leadership and the wins, losses, and lessons of being an executive. We are two women who have successfully navigated C-Suite roles and are sharing our experiences. We will be bringing on guests to tell their stories and want to spark honest conversation and discussion, which may include swearing and lots of laughs. Join us on this adventure.
Welcome to another episode of Secrets of the C-Suite. I'm Susan Sutherland, and I'm here with my co-host, Juliet Clothier. Hi, Juliet.
Susan, how are you?
I'm excited about our Unplugged session today. We usually have a guest or a key topic, but every now and then we throw in one of these Unplugged where we just chat about a few things that are on our mind, but we've got some good things today.
I think so too. I find it so interesting. We haven't talked in a long time, just the two of us, just, in our normal lives. We saw each other in January, and then we haven't really talked much since then. So I'm excited to do this, and I think it's fun to bring up topics that we are thinking about and share them with other people.
Our many listeners.
Our many listeners. Yes.
So our primary topic, which has a couple of, let's call them branches or offshoots for conversation, is about the concept of future self. And those of you who have listened to probably all of our episodes have heard us refer to this in the past and maybe chat a little bit about it. But we thought it would be a really rich topic. And so that's what we're going to spend our time talking about today. It was prompted by a newspaper article, a New York Times article that, Juliet, you read. Would you tee us up a little on that?
Sure. It's called Future Perfect, and it's by Melissa Kirsch. I'm hoping I'm saying her last name right. And I think it was from yesterday, I believe, the 21st. Anyway, she talks about two kinds of people who back into parking lots and people who front into parking lots. I guess that's how you say it. And just, what the philosophy is behind that, what their thinking is. And she does a little bit of research. And I just thought it was so tied into a lot of things we talk to our coachees about, and one of the things as a coach, as you being my coach, you've said to me, what would your future self want you to do today? And I have that written, and it's posted on my desk at work, because sometimes you don't know how to decide something, and then you think about that. Well, what would my future self want me to do? Because that can help you make those decisions. And so, but we do it a lot about just ourselves as individuals and, thinking about it in terms of our own personal growth. What she did in this article was kind of go down a rabbit hole of, what are all kinds of things that we do. One thing about the backer inners is that they prefer to do the harder maneuver first. And if my father's listening, I'm going to tell him that is the philosophy we grew up with, which was eat what you don't like first. So when we sat down to dinner, if we ate, the mashed potatoes and the meat first and we left the vegetables, we would cry, I don't want to eat it, So we were required as kids basically to eat what we don't like first. It just reminded me of that. And that is something that I've taken with me in my life. And, sometimes you got to do the hard thing first in order to enjoy the rest of it. So anyway, that's kind of the philosophy. And what I liked about the ending was, then she kind of asked herself, this is about Stephen, who wrote the parking story that she's talking about. And she says he hasn't become a backer inner, but he's become a puller througher, finding two empty spots end to end and pulling through one so he's facing out. So that's his philosophy. And I just thought that was kind of a funny way to end. He found his way to get a future reward without the upfront hassle.
Yeah. I have actually spent a lot of time thinking about this parking thing. And I started questioning myself, why do I think it's easier to back out rather than backing in the first time? And I realized it's because usually when you are parking, if you're parking between two cars, you have sort of more constraints. Whereas when you're backing up into a passageway, and you might have more room to maneuver. So I know for me, it's the fact that if I have to back into two cars and possibly a car even behind me, I've got 3 danger zones on the side of me, and I'm not, maybe convinced that I could do it without scraping my car or someone else's car. But I think that's a really good concept.
That's where new cars come in, because I have bells and whistles and cameras all over the place that stop you from hitting things. And you can see, so there's an answer to that question. Yeah.
There is. And my car, the one in the US, is a 2016 and does not have those side noises that go off when you're, but so the whole concept, I think, just to summarize it, is you make a decision based on what's going to be more pleasant or more useful or more constructive for you in the future. And in the case of parking your vehicle, it could be like half an hour after you go to the grocery store, or it could be, as in the case of some of the things we've talked about before, like getting into exercise and taking care of our health. It's really a long-term win. We're going to do a hard thing now because we want to be healthy and strong later.
Right. Yep.
And it's a really very powerful concept, I think.
Yeah. And I think that we were, trying to think about this in terms of how does this tie into being an executive and a C-suite executive? And as I said, you can have a lot of personal goals that you use this philosophy for, but what about as a leader, and what about in an organization? And that led me to think about exit strategies. It used to be that, you got into and this is before my time even, that you went into a company, you stayed with that company forever, you retired from that company, you got your gold watch and all of that. And now I think companies become stale when the leaders are in place for too long. I think that it kind of, even if you're a mission focused organization, there's a founder syndrome that comes into play when someone's in leadership for too long, because they're not getting new ideas. They're not, there's a limitation to how much creativity you can bring to an organization when you've been there so long. And I'm sure there's plenty of leaders who do well and, are creative, but I think that a lot of times in my experience that they tend to kind of fizzle out a bit.
Or settle.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it also, it's funny because as you're talking, I'm like, well, I was one of those people who worked in the same organization for all those years. And yet I must have had, let's say I was there 29 years. I think I probably had 16 or 17 different positions over the years. I mean, I started at the bottom and made myself work my way up to being an executive. And then even when I was an executive, I had a portfolio that changed rather frequently and kept me on my toes. Now, I'm not arguing that I wasn't stale. I probably was. But it also depends on how refreshed your experience gets to be by having new challenges and new input and so on. But let's get back to this exit strategy notion, because I think where you're going with that is you're in a job, you're loving it, or maybe you're not loving it, but you're in a job. And part of what I hear you suggesting is we need to be mindful of the future self. So if I'm in my job now and I'm liking it, I also need to be thinking about 3 years, 4 years, 7 years, like what should my end game be? And even if you don't have a really clear plan, to be thinking about that always. Right?
I think so. Yeah, I agree. I think that, yes, that, and I think that what happens is people are not thinking about what's next for them. Maybe they're thinking, I'm going to retire from this, which is one exit strategy.
Right.
But a lot of people like me maybe aren't ready to retire, but they have a fear of the unknown, which I also, I suffer from that. So I think that there is a moment, and maybe this comes with maturity, emotional maturity, to say, well, I don't want to get to the point where I'm managed out, because that's a possibility as well. That, you're bored, you're, the leadership of the organization that you report to as a C-suite executive might want to go in a different direction. There could be a moment where if you're in a sales focused organization, that things are not going well, and it might not be you, but those are moments where outside leadership, board members or shareholders or whatever, they might be like, maybe we need to go in a different direction. And I would say to leaders, you want to drive that conversation. You want to be ready for that conversation. So that's part of it. I'd like to hear, I'm going to ask you a question that we didn't discuss earlier, so I hope this works out. Do you want to talk about your process and your exit strategy? Like, what happened that made you create an exit strategy? Because you definitely had one.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's important to recognize that I kind of want to loop back first, and then I'll speak to my own experience, which is, what does it look like if you are driving the conversation about your engagement at work or your contributions at work? And I think that for me, there's two primary things that contribute to that. One is that you show up at work and you continue to be challenged by it. You continue to think, oh, that's interesting. What are we going to do about this new thing? There's that sense of being engaged with the actual work, because what you described was sort of you settle and you're kind of bored with it. So one way is to retain your curiosity and enthusiasm for whatever is happening now. And the other is to be investing in yourself. And that might be having a coach. It might be taking a course every now and then. It might be simply having a rich life outside of work with friends and artistic activities and going to the theater. I don't know what, these are sort of ideas that I have that allow you to retain a sense of your life as vibrant and evolving and shifting. And I think without that, both internal kind of work, as well as the engagement at the office, it's hard to think about an exit strategy, let alone devise one, right? Because you may not be thinking that far ahead, which is, of course, where the concept of future self comes. You want to be present to your life now, as well as thinking about what are the things that excite me, and how do I keep those things on the front or even the side burner. Just to mix metaphors.
Yeah, and so I think too. Yeah, and I think too. It's also, how can I keep that balance in my life so that I feel like I'm still contributing? And I think that's a big part of leadership. I mean, you do have to continue contributing. There's always something new. You have to keep fresh. So part of it is not getting in your own way and making sure you have good bench strength and building that at work and keeping things fresh and exciting at work, and also fresh and exciting outside of work. And I think that's a really, really good point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think that part of driving that decision, not to spend too much time here because I'm mindful that you've asked me a specific question, is building the conditions where you want to move on, which does mean doing a really good job, being successful, but it also means having your bench strength, having people, ideally more than one, who could step into your role and thrive. Maybe not do it instantly easy the first day, but certainly over time could grow into that. And that's, many leaders that I've heard over the years are like, well, I don't really want to grow them because then, they got no place to go, or they're going to want my job. And I'm like, yeah, but you're going to want someone else's job, right? I mean, isn't that like,
and if they leave, and if they end up leaving because you've done a good job building them, yay. I mean, they're going to say great things about you. They're going to continue to thrive out in the world. And then you stay in touch with them when the time comes.
Right. And either they bring you along or you bring them along. We've seen that a lot. It's part of the bigger picture networking. So anyway, I think there's a lot there around paying attention to now, while also being really thoughtful about, what might it look like later under different conditions. And that's that future self concept in play. So the question you asked me, let me make sure I get it right, was what went into my decision to make my exit strategy? And there were a couple of factors. One was that I had been not happy in my role for quite a while. I did not like the person for whom I worked, and I found the conditions difficult. And there were good reasons for me to stay. I was one of those people that had some golden handcuffs that made it worth my while to stay at least until I was 55. And interestingly enough, once I made that decision, things got a lot better. I got a new boss, I got some new assignments, and got a lot of accolades and attention that I had not gotten, and was part of the contributor to my dissatisfaction at work, is that I was working really hard and I felt like I was just kind of hitting my head against the wall and didn't feel terribly valued, right? So what there was sort of an intersection of, I'd been unhappy, I kind of made a decision, and then that time went really quickly, and it was, okay, this is when you said you were going to leave. And I did have sort of some second thoughts about it, but I'd already set the ball in motion. Like, I had a plan, and the plan was to share with my boss a year out from when I was hoping to leave that I was planning on leaving. I had my successor already hired. Like, I had really been thorough and thoughtful about it. But the thing that really got me to be clear about wanting to leave and knowing it was the right decision for me were two things. One was, I kept thinking about, what are the things I haven't experienced because I'm doing this? What might life look like or feel like if I had a different job, if I worked for myself, if I traveled more with my husband? I mean, there were lots of things that went into that. There was a feeling of like, you've already had this experience. Why not get some other experiences? Why not add more life experience into your basket? So it was really kind of thinking about life that way. And then the other thing was, I started to notice the lack of institutional knowledge. So problems would come around and people would say, this is a problem, but they hadn't looked at the SOPs. They hadn't asked anyone, like, was this problem a problem before? Had it been solved? Why didn't that stick? What are some things that we need to think about differently if we're solving it again? And I saw issues, primarily people-oriented issues, come around for like the fifth or the sixth time. And I was just like, I have no enthusiasm for this anymore. I just can't get excited about working with either the person who can't be worked with because they just don't want to like step up. I'd done that. I was so tired of some of these things, and including some of the things like, there was a decision made. Is it time to remake a decision, or are we just bitching about the old decision? Those kinds of things just told me, oh yeah, you just don't care about this stuff anymore. You just don't have the desire to be in the middle of this problem-solving debate anymore. And I lost patience. I was like, really? You don't know anything? You just bring in this thing without any research, without any thoughts, without, like, we have a problem. Yes. And what are your solutions? So, you could argue that was part of my job as a leader, was to create a whole generation of people who did come with solutions, but they weren't all my people. I just want to say that in my defense.
That's right.
So those two factors. One was, I had decided that at a certain time I was going to go because I wanted to have different life experiences. And then the other was this, oh my goodness, I just can't handle another one of these meetings, another one of these discussions. Let somebody else pick up the ball.
That's so funny, because I'm triggered into memory of, that's why I leave organizations pretty quick. I mean, I stay for 6 years. That's kind of my length of time. But I think a big part of it is, I can't have this conversation again. I just can't do it. Keep my reputation up. It's just like, are you kidding me so it's so funny. And then I go into new organizations and they have the same problems that the old organization had, but at least it's fresh eyes and I can bring my experience and say, oh, you probably didn't know this thing. Now you know it, and I don't want to hear it again. Anyway.
Right. So, right. But it's true. There is kind of and that might be to your point about longevity in positions. We get tired. I mean, that's why I'm a big believer in corporate sabbaticals. I'm a big believer in people using, now it's called PTO for most organizations, but if you get so much time off, use it. Go
Me
get
too.
away, get a break, refresh yourself, because being in positions of leadership is hard, even when it's good.
Yeah.
And then it can wear you down. It can just, and that's part of taking care of your future self, right? I mean, I remember
it is full circle.
Long before cell phones were really, this really dates me because it feels like cell phones have always been in our hand. But I would go, I was a BlackBerry person for when BlackBerries were the thing. And I would choose vacations in remote countries where there was absolutely no way anybody could get a hold of me. I'd go hiking in Nepal. Sorry, I'm going to be gone for 3.5 weeks. There's no way to get a hold of me. Deal with it.
Fantastic.
Right? And it was a great way to disconnect. Now, wherever you go, you're still connected. So there's a little more personal discipline that's involved with that. So I've answered your question.
Mm-hmm.
And what are your thoughts about exit strategy, which doesn't have to be retirement, but exit strategy to a new job or a new role? And you've done that many times. How do you know?
Well, as I said, my frustration outweighs my joy, I think, is part of it.
That's a really good measure.
It's with any relationship, right? It's like, okay, I think I've done what I can do here, and it's time to move on. I think too that you talked a bit about this is, you've built what you can build. You said, what I liked about your exit strategy is you had your successor in place. That is so hard to have, especially when there's not a budget for it. There's not, building a succession plan is one of the hardest things. And, I talked about this at the job I'm at now is we don't have a lot of bench strength. We have a lot of amazing people doing really good work at the level they're doing the good work. But there's not a lot of people who are ready to step into leadership roles. And I'm going to be interested. I'm going to a conference next week, as I talked about, and I'm going to be interested to talk to people about that. Is that a symptom of independent schools? Do we tend to not have bench strength and look outside for bench strength? It's very expensive to replace a person in an executive role when you have to do a search and they don't know the culture and all the things that can come into building a new person. So why don't we have more bench strength? And a lot of it's because we don't have the money to invest in that person or, that system that helps to build that. So I think that's something I want to explore a little bit more. I think too, for me, when I'm ready to go, I'm ready to go. I'm just not good at pretending. That's just not who I am. So I'm a little bit more direct than some people expect me to be sometimes. And I'll say things and I'm realizing that, they're not really interested in what I have to say anymore. They're kind of burnt out on my opinion about things. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'm just reading too much into that. But anyway, that's been a part of it too. And then I'm not learning anything else. I don't feel like I'm learning more, and I am constantly needing to learn and grow and
be challenged
and
get
contribute.
The best ways.
Yeah. If I'm not contributing. Yeah. So it's funny because I thought we talked a little bit back before we started recording, and we were talking about kind of what are the things that create fear around making change happen or an exit strategy, right? And some people are like, can I get another job? Like, am I going to be able to find another job? And as we get older, a lot of executive roles, like I can tell you, CFO roles, they like to have somebody who's older and more experienced in those roles generally because it's so operational. And so, the experience and the emotional maturity that you get with somebody who's been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
Is super helpful in these situations. So I don't think there's as much ageism in the nonprofit world as there is in the general corporate world. I don't think. But I think that, that's a fear that people have. It's like, am I ever what if I can't find a job? I can't have it feel comfortable with an exit strategy. And so what about ageism? What is the thing that happens in an organization where they're thinking that younger is better?
I'm sitting here thinking, how do I even tackle that question? Because, part of me is like, let's not even talk about an organization or the leaders in an organization having a bias towards younger. Look at our culture.
Yeah.
Look at our culture. Our culture is so youth fixated. There's an assumption that younger people have more energy, that they have higher potential, that, there's certainly, I would argue that my nieces who are, now they're in their 20s, but when they were the early teens, they were more tech savvy than me. Why? Because they grew up with it. We're late adapters because it got introduced when we were already full-fledged adults.
Right.
So there's some things about that I recognize it's a matter of timing. But, my own bias, and that's part of it's because of my age and experience and my life, happenings, is that ageism doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you want someone with a lot of life experience? And there are older people who have tremendous energy and vision. So why wouldn't you want them to be part of your organization? But, I'm not calling the shots in all these places. I do, from what I read, there's no question that the job market is tilted towards the young. And it is harder if you are an older person. I would probably say 50 or older, and you're out in the job market looking for a job. It's harder to get noticed. It's harder to get an interview, and it's harder to get a job.
And I think too, with all the information online, you can't, it used to be, well, don't put so many years of experience on your resume. That was like the thing, right? Well, now they can go, you have it all on LinkedIn, or you have it, it's out there for the world to see. So there's no place to hide. But I think that the smart companies see and want the right person for the job. So maybe a little harder, maybe takes a little bit longer, but that's part of your exit strategy, right? Is to find, where do I want to go, and where are people thinking smartly about you hiring somebody who's 50 or older. I think that's a good one. So I don't know. Yeah. I think just that exit strategy really is about a lot of self-reflection on how much am I contributing and where can I contribute somewhere else and get what I need out of the situation as well.
Yeah. And also, we haven't talked about this at all because we're really we're privileged to be able to talk about the intellectual and spiritual challenges of our professional lives. But, there's real practical considerations too. You have a job with a good salary and some benefits. Do you really want to find yourself in a job that doesn't pay as much, or God forbid, doesn't give you benefits in today's world?
Exactly.
Particularly in the United States with the kind of scene we have going on with healthcare, no. Mm-hmm. So there are some really legitimate things to be concerned about if you are an older person, however you want to define that, who's looking at, I want to make a change, and how can I make a change that is both growth and gets me into a situation that also takes care of my very practical considerations and needs. Right? It's not impossible. It's just that the environment, especially right now in the United States, I'm looking at how many jobs were added in 2025, compared
160,000 or so.
Yeah, compared to every month in 2024. The statistics are incredidible, and it's hard to know. People have talked about the economy and how actually 2026 looks like it was more vibrant than people expected, but I still think it's totally unpredictable. And it's clear that employers aren't hiring as much. So anyway, I'm going to stop because I think I'm going down kind of a different path and it's getting a bit gloomy. My sense is that the job market, no matter how old you are, is kind of tricky right now. And I think what you and I have been trying to focus on is, okay, regardless of what's happening in the world, how do you as a professional use this concept of what am I doing now, and is it satisfying, and is it challenging, and is it growing me, and also think about who might I want to be 2 years from now? Or what kind of work do I want to be doing? And how to position yourself so that you're serving that vision down the line, taking care of your future self.
So I would like to wrap up with each of us giving a piece of advice to those who maybe are thinking about an exit strategy or don't have an exit strategy and now are triggered into thinking maybe they should have one. And it's something that I am going to be working on myself, and I hope we can do maybe a whole episode about this, is I am going to learn AI. I use ChatGPT every day. But I know that there is so much more out there. And I'm reading a lot about AI in education. That's a big deal. What are the AI proof jobs and careers? But what are the things that you need to know in order to be a really good leader in this environment? And if you are worried about ageism or not being relevant, this is a place that you can learn. There is so much online learning. I am a member of the master class. I have a subscription to that, and I'm going to be taking a class in AI. I just think that knowing how to use the tools and keeping up with it is going to be key. And you can use that in your conversations, your cover letter, that you know AI and you are a proponent and you know how to use it for good. And I think that's really important. So that's my piece of advice.
Excellent. Excellent advice. What advice would I give? I think you said it at the top, so I'll just steal your thought. It's so important to be reflective, to give some deep and lasting thought to who you are and how you want to be in the world. I mean, I keep coming back to that. It's probably sound like a broken record to you, Juliet, because you hear me talk about this all the time. I mean, how do you know where you want to go if you don't even know who you are? Yeah. And so to me, there's some building blocks on that. So I'm kind of going in a really different direction. It's not so much, yes, I would say go learn AI and figure out how you can sharpen new skills and understand things differently or better. But I think also there's a certain amount of, what do you care about? What are your values? What has stood by you? What could you not tolerate? And to remember those things and refresh them and make sure that they are your guiding principles, that those are your North Star as you navigate in uncharted territory. To me, that's when you don't know what to do, it's like, well, what do I feel like? Or what's motivating to me? And you fall back on that to know what to do next.
I love it. That's great. I like our combination of advice.
Worth what people have paid for to hear it. Yep. As I like to say. Well, this has been really fun. Another episode of Unplugged. This has been another episode of Secrets of the C-Suite, the podcast, even though it's been unplugged with Juliet Clothier and me, Susan Sutherland. Before we sign off, we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. If you like what you've heard and you've listened to other episodes, please leave us a review. Give us 5 stars if you enjoyed it so other people can find us and follow along. We're so glad you've joined us for this episode of Secrets of the C-Suite, the podcast. We'll be back with another episode in 2 weeks. In the meantime, please tell your friends and coworkers about us, and be sure to follow, subscribe, and give us a 5-star rating if you enjoyed listening. Secrets of the C-Suite is produced by Juliet Clothier, Susan Sutherland, and Brian Clothier. Original music is by Brian Clothier. And the podcast is inspired by leaders like you.